Thanks, everyone, and thanks for braving through the weather. I know it probably wasn't easy to get here and to stay here. I imagine there's things to do before the rain comes again, but I really appreciate it, and I know Twitter appreciates being here. One of the recent things we've done at Twitter is really started to focus more and more at the industry level. So about 8 months ago now, we kind of we reorganized our sales and account management teams and really focused them on specific industries. So everything ranging from retail to tech B2B to auto to sports, et cetera. And one of the reasons for doing that is we really did want to be closer to the folks who are actually working in those industries, work really closely with our research and marketing teams to bring more meaningful insights to all of you working in, for example, the auto industry. So I'm really thrilled to be here today. I know our auto team is really thrilled to be working with some of you and working in your industry. Joe Vlasic is here. He's one of the account executives on our auto team and is really leading the charge in a lot we're doing in that space. So huge thanks to him as well. I thought I'd start by giving a general overview of Twitter, sort of how we're thinking about the world, what we're doing, and kind of how we're thinking about Twitter and where it's evolving to. From there, I tried to tailor a lot of our work to the auto industry generally, but honestly more specifically to auto dealers. Just to get a sense, are there a lot of auto dealers in the room? Okay, so a couple. I think the examples will be kind of relevant to everyone, but the data is specific in some places to auto dealerships, and some of the examples and best practices are specific to auto dealerships. But why don't I start with kind of how we're thinking about the world. Let me start by saying this is not how we're thinking about the world. This is obviously a map from a long time ago, and I think one of the things that stands out here is kind of just how divided it is. A lot of times, kind of throughout history, how we defined ourselves was by boundaries, by ethnicities, by differences in social class, et cetera. What we're trying to do at Twitter is really turn that on its head. And so if you could contrast that map to this map, this is a visualization of tweets sent during the Euro Cup final, so soccer Euro Cup final from last year. And one of the amazing things on here is, I think what was kind of historically a very regional event, what you could see here is, I think the blue is tweets to or from France and red is to or from England. But what you could see and what really stands out in my mind here is, even though this game is played at a fixed time, and this is the middle of the night in a lot of parts of the world, there are tweets to and from 160 different countries. All of this is to say, I think it really is changing the landscape of communication and how connected we are to events around the world and activities happening around the world. So what we like to say is Twitter brings you closer. We purposely don't necessarily answer that because it sort of depends what you want to be brought closer to, what your interests are, and we'll talk about interests and categories on Twitter a little bit later. But a couple different examples of Twitter bring you closer. First, closer to anyone, anywhere. Here's kind of a fun example. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Kevin Durant, but during the NBA lockout, I guess going on a couple years ago now, he tweeted this out to his followers. So this lockout's really boring. I need to run around or something. Anyone got a flag football game or anything like that? This guy in Oklahoma City, George Overbay, tweets back at him and to all of his followers, got a game in Stillwater. I need a deep threat. To which Kevin Durant responds, can I play? Can you catch? We've won the championship for 3 years, so George takes his flag football seriously. Kevin asks if he's for real, only if you bring your A game. Well, what happens? Sure enough, Kevin Durant shows up for the flag football game in Oklahoma City. And appears to be pretty good, not surprisingly, maybe. And one of the fascinating things about the video is for a flag football game, I'm not sure if you noticed, but it got a pretty big audience. And one of the reasons, I think, is it became a story unto itself. Everyone who was following George Overbay, but maybe more importantly, Kevin Durant, who was in the area, came out to see this. Another example here, I know the expression is politics makes for strange bedfellows, but I think sometimes that's equally true of Twitter. So Drake, Canadian hip hop and rap artist, tweets out kind of smugly, the first millions, the hardest, who responds, but his good friend, T. Boone Pickens, kind of billionaire, Texas magnate, to which he says, the first billion is a hell of a lot harder. And Drake responds, T. Boone Pickens just stunted on me heavy. So two folks who may not communicate day to day, run in the same social circles, obviously brought closer on Twitter. One of the things that I think really took a step up in the last year or so is Twitter and events. So a couple big ones from last year, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the Olympics, I think many people referred to as kind of for the first time the Twitter Olympics in terms of just how much coverage there was on Twitter. A lot of people actually tuned into Twitter from the US to see kind of the results in real time for events that were happening that weren't being broadcast here at the time because it was the middle of the night or off hours in terms of primetime TV. Similarly, the election last year, a lot of folks referred to as the Twitter election, and one kind of really interesting fact is there were more tweets on election day alone than the entire 2008 presidential election cycle. And I think for anyone who watched the debates or the conventions or anything like that, I think you got, and happened to look at Twitter at the same time, it was really inundated with a stream of running commentary on the debates to a point where you almost didn't need to actually be watching to know kind of what was front of mind to a lot of the debate watchers. Twitter also allows you to be closer to your customers. It's another fun example that I like from Smart Car. So someone randomly tweeted at Smart Car, or about Smart Car actually, not even at them, saw a bird, cropped on a Smart Car, totaled it. So someone at Smart Car picks this up, sees this, and they respond almost instantly, I think a day or so later, back at him. Couldn't have been one bird, sounds like more 0.5 million. Seriously, we did the math, and they created this fancy infographic showing the weight of the various types of bird poop that it would actually take to destroy a Smart Car. And of course, they're promoting the frame of the car and how strong it is. This in turn gets a great response, outsmarted by Smart Car from the original poster, and becomes almost a news story in and of itself. So kind of with no advertising, just by kind of picking up on this in real time, coming up with a clever response, not only did they turn around an originally negative sentiment, but they kind of got themselves out there in the news and got a lot of followers at the same time. One of the other things that I think Twitter has become more and more known for is what we call the second screen nature of it. So this is people using Twitter while they're watching TV. And if you look at the stats, roughly 50% of Twitter users are using it while they're watching TV. And just to get a sense, this is tweet volume around each of the various TV shows. I won't go through them here, but everything from Waking Dead to Scandal. And you can see the volume for the respective shows. But one of the really interesting things, and where I think Twitter and TV is maybe even most interesting, is Twitter's actually acting like a sort of EKG for what's happening on TV. So you could see the peaks and valleys here each week for each of the various shows. When the show is airing, tweet volume about that show goes up dramatically. When it's not, it drops down. So it does give you a sense of just how much communication there is while people are watching TV, both the programming and on the commercial side of things. And we're making some big strides in this space and some big investments in this space in particular. We just announced a partnership a couple months ago with Nielsen, where Nielsen historically has provided ratings around and metrics around the measure of an audience size. So for a various show or various primetime slot or any other airtime, how many people were watching. Twitter is going to be providing a separate engagement metric. So not just how many people were watching the content, whether it's a commercial or the programming, but how were people interacting with it? How engaged were they? Were they tweeting about it? Were they using social media at the same time? Along those same lines, we just acquired a company called Bluefin, which did exactly this. They kind of looked at TV data in correspondence with social media data, and then kind of provided all sorts of metrics around just how both TV programming and TV commercials were actually shaping the conversation and shaping actions taken online. So we're still working on integrating that. I think it'll be a bit of time before it's kind of fully functional as a part of Twitter. But it's a great step in the right direction, I think. So at our heart, why I said at the beginning, Twitter brings you closer, we purposely don't say closer to what, is it's really an interest network. So it's all about the interests of our users. Some of those interests might be everything from mom to humor, cars, et cetera. Some of them might be brands, but Twitter at its heart is centered around that. So when you sign up for a Twitter account, you'll choose who you're going to follow. It's a little bit different from Facebook and some of the other types of social media that are out there, in the sense that you're not necessarily following your friends or your family. You probably are following them as well, but a lot of what you're following is because you're interested in getting more information about it. So I'm thinking about my own account. I follow a lot of news sites, everything from kind of New York Times to local San Francisco news, because that's where I live. Sports teams that I like. I follow a lot of the tech industry news, just because that's what I'm interested in and care about. I follow a number of name brands, so and many of them in the auto space, because I love cars and particularly love motorcycles. So that gives me a sense of kind of what I'd like to see day to day, what news and what updates I'd like to be getting. It's not necessarily about, is my sister's posting pictures of her kids. Don't really use Twitter so much for that. Some people do, but I think we're kind of shifting away from it as a notion of kind of communicating with friends about where you're going, what you're eating, et cetera, and more towards almost a media consumption or media distribution tool of I'm going there to find specific information that I care about and to see the updates in a certain set of interest categories. And that has a lot of implications for marketing, which we'll talk about later, and kind of getting your brand out there. But first, just to get a sense of kind of how big that network is. As of the end of last year, we were at 200 million active users per month. That number is growing and growing at a rate of about 100% year over year. Even, I think, more impressive or kind of more monumental in a lot of ways, and this says a lot about the industry, not just about Twitter. Mobile is growing about 40% quarter over quarter. And when you look at just kind of how people are using mobile, 60% of active users access it on mobile. 23%, that's actually the primary way they use Twitter, which is very different, I think, from the way folks have used other platforms. A lot of it, I think, goes back to how Twitter was founded initially and kind of why it exists. A lot of people wonder about the 140 character limit for a tweet. The reason is it started as an SMS-based platform, so kind of pre-smartphone, and a lot of the carriers put a 160 character text limit on any individual SMS. So we built in about 20 characters for your @ handle, then had the remaining 140 for the message. I think the collateral, maybe unintentional effect of that is as smartphones have grown and evolved, Twitter's in a unique place to kind of take advantage of very limited real estate on a smartphone. So because we were always mobile first from the beginning, I think we kind of develop things as a mobile platform first and then think about, at the same time, desktop and and tablets and things like that. One of the ways we're evolving, though, is we started with this 140 character limit. The 140 characters is now almost more of a headline. So here are a couple examples. I know it's a little bit tough to see, but this is a technology that we refer to internally, at least, as Twitter cards. It's just really a fancy way of saying bringing any kind of rich media into the tweet, whether it's a photo, a summary, a video. So the 140 character limit is still there as the headline, but if you were to click on the tweet, in your timeline, you'd see an expanded card, which could have a video from YouTube, Vimeo. It could have a photo, or in the case of a lot of websites and media outlets, it might have a summary of, in this case, a New York Times article. It's got the headline, the byline, and then a few sentences of the article along with a picture. So the benefits of this, I think, are that information is there. It's easily accessible. If you care more once you see the headline to see the information. So as a user consuming this information, you could see this in your tweet timeline. You don't have to click on a URL, go to another page, open up a browser, et cetera. I think the benefit for people who are kind of sharing information on Twitter is all you do, for example, in the case of a video card, if you want the video embedded into the tweet, all you do is put the YouTube link there, and the rest of it is taken care of by the platform. Similarly with Flickr and some of the photo sites. On the summary cards, there's a little bit of work to do if you have a website and wanted to actually be able to publish excerpts from parts of your website, but it's pretty simple. It's a couple lines of code, and we do have partners like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, that kind of have this deal with us. We also have some smaller partners. One of the things, again, unique about Twitter is this looks the same across platforms. So just what you saw was an example from desktop. It looks exactly the same on mobile. And because it is this kind of click to expand video or picture, it's very mobile friendly. So you could still see your timeline on a single mobile screen, but if you care to look at a video or a picture, you could expand, see that, and then collapse back into the tweet without noticing any difference across platforms, whether it's tablet, desktop, or mobile. So turning from kind of how Twitter's evolving, I think, to a little bit of data from third parties, in this case, Google Ipsos mobile study, and a J.D. Power and a couple other studies. I think all of you probably know this better than I do, but the automobile process for buying cars is actually changing and evolving a lot too. So some stats here, I won't go through all of them. 65% of people are influenced by a friend's favorable post of a brand or vehicle. 48% of customers, going back to the mobile point, looked up dealer information on mobile. And then 44% of customers make a purchase decision effectively before they ever get to a kind of brick and mortar dealer. Some more stats here. Again, I won't go through all of these, but some eye-opening ones. 46% of 18 to 24-year-olds would choose internet access over owning a car. And I think this quote from someone at General Motors is pretty telling too. So with this generation, what owning a car means is completely different from previous generations. It was a rite of passage. Now that rite of passage is a cell phone. That doesn't mean that cars are any less popular or any less important. It's just that the rite of passage is a way of getting to the purchase decision, I think, in many cases. So one of the ways to kind of, what does this mean for a marketer in the auto space, whether it's a dealer or a brand or a parts reseller? The real key takeaway is you have to participate in the conversation. So here's just a couple examples. Jen tweets out, buying a car for mom. I'm between a Kia Soul or a 13 Outback. Soul is super cute, et cetera. And Kia Motors actually gets involved in the conversation. Go with the Kia Soul, you'll love it. I'm planning on getting one very soon. This is just kind of one example of how this type of conversation might happen. But taking a step back, let's look at let's do a deeper dive on some consumer trends here. I think one of the key things, probably the most common question I get, whether it's from auto or any of the other industries I work with, and some of them are less obvious fits for Twitter. Let's assume like business and industrial markets, the technology B2B space, and actually, in fact, those are some of the most popular interest categories on Twitter and the most effective ones for marketers. But this gives you a sense of just kind of what the audience is on Twitter. 8.1 million Twitter users plan to buy a vehicle in the next year. 3.1 million searched the internet for auto parts supplies in the last 6 months, et cetera. I won't read through all these in the interest of time. But to give you a sense of just kind of what the scope is, just about a third of new and leased car prospects are active on Twitter at any given time. And this gives you a sense of just the magnitude of that versus the overall market that's out there. What is the market opportunity on Twitter? One of the things that we've seen, and we measure this across all different industries, is just kind of how are conversations about a certain industry. So we look at a number of different keywords that are kind of core and unique to that industry, and then trace the volume within the conversations that are happening on Twitter at any given time. Well, auto, as you can see from this, is exploding, and I think this chart doesn't even quite do it justice. It looks like in August of 2011, it was roughly 6.2 million conversations per week. It's now at almost 11 million. My guess is, this is a few months old, my guess is it's now broken the 11 million mark. So you're seeing roughly, doing the math in my head, I don't know, 80-something% year-over-year growth just in the amount of conversations about auto, which is really incredible. So I talked before about kind of how when you sign up for a Twitter account and when you start thinking about who to follow, it's kind of matching to your interests. I think there's a real opportunity there to think about marketing and reaching your potential customers in the same way. So interests basically paint a canvas of opportunities. Every time someone says kind of, I'm interested in brand X or brand Y, or anytime someone engages with a tweet, that sends a very clear signal that, that over time, when we have a lot of these signals, we get a pretty good picture of the different interest categories a person is interested in. I think one of the things we say at a very simplistic level is you are who you follow on Twitter. That's probably the strongest signal at a high level. If you're following a lot of kind of off-roading related handles, you're probably interested in off-roading, but then of course that's layered with a bunch of different other interests, whether it's sports or medicine or TV, et cetera. And what you want to try to do as kind of a marketer is align with those interests. Here are some top keywords related to car conversations. And then kind of the reason you want to do that is to not just reach potential consumers, but in many senses, start to influence the influencers. So if you think about it, everyone on Twitter has followers that are seeing every post of theirs. So if you're reaching one person who's tweeting out 5 times a day, in many cases about a specific auto brand, you're not just reaching that person, you're reaching all of their followers. And you can look at some stats here. 5 times more likely to post on a blog. This is Twitter users versus the general population. They're 3 times more likely to comment on blog posts. They're 4 times more likely to comment on news websites. And what that means is, how do you reach them, I think? You want to prioritize content. So when we took a look at what was most helpful in the auto space when people were making an auto buying decision, maybe not surprisingly, product specs is number 1. The second thing they're doing, and this is on mobile specifically, is finding a dealer, checking the availability of a model, watching product videos, et cetera. So each of these is an opportunity to connect with a very specific subset of an interest category. So thinking about it from a marketing perspective, a lot of people ask the very basic question, which I didn't know before working for Twitter, which is just like, what is marketing on Twitter? What do I do? How do I reach those folks? I think at the surface level, one of the easiest things you could do is if you have other forms of advertising, whether it's print or TV or in some cases radio, you want to start to have a unified theme across marketing. One of the easiest ways to do that with Twitter is to start including hashtags and @handles. So that would link, in these cases, just a couple examples. You have Fiat with the hashtag Fiat USA, new Lexus ES, new generation, et cetera. All of these, first of all, link your different marketing channels together. Second of all, they're a very good way of getting metrics on how successful a campaign is, especially if you're using a unique hashtag. So in the case of new Lexus ES, if they were only putting this hashtag in, aligning it with a certain marketing campaign, and then they were putting that on TV, on billboards, et cetera, magazines, print articles, they could start to see what the uplift is and start to see that at any given time, you know, and try to coordinate with other campaigns they're running and see the relative success. So really there are 3 ways, I think, to think about kind of what the marketing message is out there. Owned, paid, and earned. So owned is sort of your relationship with your followers on Twitter. This is, you know, you've built up a solid follower base, or you can build up a solid follower base. Anytime someone is following you, any content you're putting out there, whether it's, you know, a product-related article or a link to a video or just kind of news on certain types of discounts or sales or how to find a dealer, anytime you post that, it's going to all of your followers, and they've sort of already raised their hand saying, I'm interested in this because I'm following you. And so that's a key opportunity to build a relationship with those followers. The next stage, I would say, is paid. And I'll get into the various forms of what kind of an ad looks like on Twitter in a second. Paid media, in effect, just takes the same message you're sending to your followers, or any subset of those messages. If you want to tweet out a particular discount, and you could say, I want this, it'll automatically go to your followers, but you could say, I want this to go to people like my followers, people who live in a certain area, people of a certain gender, and you could overlay all these different types of targeting. It's not changing the message, it's not even changing the format of the tweet. What it's doing is showing it to people, other people who are interested beyond your follower base. In addition, you could actually, try to get new followers through paid. And then finally, earned. This is sort of the equivalent of word of mouth, but online. So if you were to invest in what we call a promoted account to get new followers, you get 100 new followers. Each of them has an average of 100 followers. Anytime they retweet something you're putting out there, mention your brand name, talk about a discount you're having, it's going to all of their followers, and there's no charge for that. That's kind of what we call earned media. It's earned as a result of the content you're providing and the reach you already have. So here's kind of a very high-level overview of kind of what our promoted products look like. This is on the right-hand side of the screen for those of you who don't use Twitter too much. That is what we call the timeline. That's kind of your stream of incoming tweets. On the left, upper left is your profile, so it gives you a sense of how many times you've tweeted, how many people you're following, how many people are following you. And just below that, we have what we call the who to follow box, and that's recommendations on people you might be interested in following. So if you take a look there, there's 3. in this case. The first one is what we call a promoted. It's a promoted product, and that is, that's back to what I mentioned before, the promoted account. That's someone advertising, but they're saying, I'm looking for followers in this space. And you could do that in a couple different ways, which I'll get into in a minute. But you're saying, very generally, I'm looking for people who are interested in auto, or I'm looking for people who are like the followers of these brands. And I'll go into the targeting aspect in a second. The second two spaces there are done algorithmically. So for this person's account, Twitter design, this is actually the second one is the CEO of Twitter, that connection is pretty obvious. But in many cases, again, if you go back to that interest graph, and if you look at who I'm following, for example, and I'm following a lot of motorcycle brands, there's one I'm not following, but it seems to overlay nicely. Our system will kind of already know that's potentially relevant to what you're interested in and will suggest followers. It's, I think, a very good way of kind of, a very good and non-intrusive way of suggesting other content that you could consume. And then lastly, and probably across the board, with the exception of auto brands, maybe the least useful in this space, is the promoted trend. So this is the equivalent of a homepage takeover in the digital world. So it's like buying a banner ad that will stay there for 24 hours. The trend space, with the exception of the promoted trend, is what's trending on Twitter now. So it's kind of the hashtag that most people are, using the most at any given time, and it changes dynamically throughout the day. The promoted trend does not change. It's a hashtag that a company would choose to put there for 24 hours, pay a flat fee, and get 60 million plus viewers, and a very, very high engagement rate for people who do actually go to check out what that hashtag is. That said, it's primarily a brand advertising tool where you're trying to reach a massive audience and you're less concerned with any kind of direct response action taken from it. So I talked about targeting, and this, oh, actually, let me go back. I forgot one key one, which is, I think, the bread and butter of the promoted products, and that's the promoted tweet. So if you go back to the timeline, the first one there, which it's tough to read, but it says, Barista Bar, hey San Franciscans, isn't it hot today? Come in for a free iced coffee with the purchase of a scone. Use hashtag Barista Bar for the discount. And then underneath it, it has a little orange arrow saying promoted by Barista Bar. Now, what I think is unique about this ad format is it's no different than the tweet Barista Bar would have sent out organically to their followers. I think in a lot of ways, if you think about marketing traditionally, it's been this sort of roadblock. If you think about old school TV advertising, you know, this program is sponsored by so-and-so, and it was sort of standing between the person who was trying to consume the content and whatever the programming was. In the world of digital, at least initially, advertising wasn't too different from that. It was a lot of kind of pop-ups, pop-unders, banner ads, and things like that that tried to kind of take you away from the article or content you were interested in consuming. We've tried to turn that model on its head. So the content itself is the ad. So Barista Bar would have tweeted this out to their followers. The only thing different visually is the orange arrow saying promoted by Barista Bar. The only thing different in effect for Barista Bar is, one, it goes to a broader base of people who share similar interests, and two, given just the volume of tweets that come through on any given day, if I, for example, fly here from San Francisco, I'm going to have my phone off, my computer off probably for a few hours. I'll miss a couple hundred tweets. If Barista Bar were promoting this, when I turn my phone back on, it would go back up to the top of my timeline, kind of above the fold, for lack of a better word. So it kind of brings it front of mind, even though I'm already following them and would have seen that content anyway. Had I missed it, it's now top of mind. So across all of our products, with the exception of the promoted trend, which is the kind of brand-focused homepage takeover equivalent, we have a lot of different forms of targeting available. Before I get into the interest category targeting, there's geo-targeting, so you could limit it to a particular geography. There's gender targeting, et cetera, a lot of the traditional forms of targeting. What I think is really unique and what's a fairly new development with Twitter is we started being able to target from very, very broad interest categories like automotive, business, travel, et cetera, to sort of more narrowly secondary interests, sedans, SUVs, convertibles, down to being able to customize your target set. So you could say, in addition to people in the Chicago area, I want to target people like the followers of Toyota and Cars.com or Toyota and Audi, et cetera, and then start to build a graph of the folks you specifically want to target. Now that doesn't mean it goes to every follower of Toyota, but it sort of takes an overview of what those followers are like, what they have in common, and then tries to match other people like them. So it's sort of a look-alike model. Another thing that I think is a huge development, this actually just came out yesterday on our platform, but it's something called keyword targeting in timeline. So I think there was a presentation from Google earlier today. I'm not sure how many folks saw it, but Google operates on a model, in search at least, where it's a keyword-based advertising model. Basically, you could run on a term like, new cars Chicago, and then we'll likely see an ad from a dealer around the Chicago area. It's an auction-based system. And you build a campaign around what keywords you're seeking to advertise against. As of yesterday, you could now do that on Twitter as well. You could always do that in search on Twitter if you were searching for a particular hashtag. The difference is the system will now dynamically kind of read tweets. For example, if someone tweets out to their followers, just bought a great new Kia, looking for looking for a great car wash or something like that. Each of those are keywords. And the system will start to recognize, well, that person is interested in a car wash. These other folks, marketers, want to run against the keywords car wash, relevant ad, and it will serve in the timeline promoted tweets that are relevant to that. And it's dynamic and changing constantly. So it's not like Google in the sense that the person doesn't have to be specifically searching for a single product or solution or service. They might just mention casually that they're looking for a hotel in Mexico or ask for a recommendation on something, and the system could kind of pick up on that and serve them relevant advertising. It also filters out negative sentiment, so if someone is actually complaining about Starbucks and they're expressing discontent about a brand, it will not serve them an ad from that brand. Any questions on that? I think I'd like to pause there because I know I tried to cover a lot and it's not necessarily reflected in the slides. Yeah, thanks for a good transition. I was about to mention that next. So the pricing is very similar to Google in the sense that it's an auction-based model. So in the case of a promoted tweet in timeline, so that is going back, that's the barista bar example here in the timeline, you're paying per engagement, which means every time someone clicks on the URL or retweets or favorites. Am I missing anything? Joe, keep me honest. Or replies to it. So any of those is what we call an engagement, and you'll be charged on a cost per engagement model. Any further retweets, for example, if someone then retweets that to someone else, that person retweets it to 10 more people, those are not, you are not charged for those. That's what I refer to as earned media. And it's an auction-based system on cost per engagement in that sense. On the follower side, so the who to follow, Barista Bar in this case is trying to get new followers, you'd be paying per new follower. So someone clicked on it and chose to follow Barista Bar. And again, it's an auction-based system. You say how much you're willing to pay, and it goes, it's kind of using a dynamic auction for the open inventory in this case, and it goes to the highest bidder with the relevancy factor, very similar to Google's search in that sense.
A lot of your examples that you show are people very, very high up in the brand level.
Yeah.
Do you have any good examples of people who are close to the point of sale?
Yes, and I'll get there. It's actually the next segment, and I'll probably, again, in the interest of time, I'll go through some of this quickly. This is just kind of a visualization of what you might do to capture the market opportunity. So if you thought about that funnel that I had before, thinking of the high level at kind of the, car enthusiasts, and then compact auto, maybe one level down to followers like those of Mini USA, and you start to build a graph and get to a specific set of people that I think are more and more relevant to your brand, and that's all easily done through the interface. One thing is that people ask a lot is what are the engagement rates like across the board? So I think it's between 1% and 3% across the board for all industries. Drilling that down even more narrowly to auto, 1% promoted tweets, average engagement rate, 1.2% promoted tweets in search, which is, again, the product that's very similar to Google, where you're searching for Hyundai in the Twitter search bar. Relatively, for digital advertising, a relatively high engagement rate. When you compare that to typical display advertising, which is 0.05%, certainly higher than that. And I don't know if you got any information. I worked at Google for 6 years prior to Twitter, and I know we used to tell advertisers that typically click-through rate of between 0.5% and 1% is very, very good on search. So this is closer in line with Google than to display advertising, but it's very different in the sense that you're not just reaching people at the very kind of point of research. You're reaching potentially a broader group or narrower group based on interest. So I think thinking across the board, there's really 3 areas that I think objectives might fall into. So increase market share, build brand equity, and drive traffic. I'm going to go pretty quickly through the increase market share and build brand equity, because I do think that's kind of what you're referring to. That's probably more oriented to the auto brands. And the last part, at least in terms of the examples I have, is most oriented to dealers and people who are selling other auto goods. Consumers are highly engaged with your branded content. This is a constant contact study as to why people are following. So 64% follow a brand because they're a customer. 84% of followers read the tweets posted by brands, so high level of engagement and consumption of the material there. 23% actually tweet about the brands they follow, and studies show that 50% are more likely to buy a brand after they're following them on Twitter. And then, as I said before, I won't go into the numbers, people are influencing each other. So you want to get to these influencers because 40% are saying that they are very or somewhat likely to use social media to recommend a brand to others. Another example of this, brands can spark word of mouth, and Twitter does this particularly well. So not to mention other names or logos, I suppose. The likelihood to share or retweet a story per user. Twitter users are 5 times more likely, according to this study, by UMPF, to share content than on Facebook. And I think that in part goes back to the different purposes behind the social networks. For example, if I'm on Facebook, as a lot of people are, to see, to connect with my friends and family members, see pictures from their vacations, etc., that isn't necessarily the time or place or the group I'd be sharing brand information with. If I'm going to Twitter and I'm expressing an interest in auto and following a lot of people in the auto space, they're following me back. That's kind of a much more targeted audience, and I think that, I'm just kind of hypothesizing, but my guess is in a lot of cases that's why there's a greater likelihood to share. So a couple things, these are more brand examples. Generate ways that people could kind of take advantage of that at the brand level. Generate pre-launch buzz. This is an example of a video from Ford kind of showing day 4 with the user, what does this look like? And this one in particular is in Argentina, and they ended up reaching 50% of all Twitter users in Argentina with it. Share exclusive content. I think this one applies kind of across the board. Obviously, people want to see, whether it's videos of a car that's about to be released or a new product that's about to be released, everyone wants to find unique content, and Twitter's a unique place to do that, I think, with video, with pictures, and then also even in response to what other people are talking about. So this is a case, the first pre-production of the Impala rolled off the assembly line. Who's the first to get one? And they actually show a picture of it rolling off the assembly line. This is a really interesting example from Audi, and there is sound, I think. Where they basically set up a contest on Twitter to have an R8 for a day. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they asked people to kind of explain to them why they wanted the R8, picked a winner, and actually delivered it to her door, and then posted that on Twitter along with all the followers of Audi and also all the followers of the hashtag #WantAnR8. So it was a good way to kind of, first of all, generate buzz, and then also show that they followed through on their commitment with the contest. And here's some examples of what those tweets look like. Picture us pulling up to your house with an R8, got it. Now tell us why you want an R8, and we might just deliver it. Building brand equity, so a lot of these, again, are targeted towards bigger brands, and I'm going to go through them quickly. I think there are a couple examples for anyone who is doing TV advertisement. There are a couple really interesting examples in here. Talked about this before, but big events usually lead to big conversations on Twitter, both because of the second screen nature, and just because even if it's an athletic event that, like the Olympics, where not everyone's watching it in real time, everyone's a fan and everyone's kind of a critic at the same time, and there's constant conversation back and forth. And you could actually see the biggest event to date is, in fact, the Euro Cup, that example from the beginning of the presentation. I think it is a good way, whether, really at any level. I think this one's true at the local level, regional level, the brand level, the dealer level. If there's any way to integrate with major events that are happening, that's a great way to capture an audience that is already talking about that event online. So in this particular case, it was Chevy in the opening ceremony. We've been bringing people together for 100 years. They tried to tie it to the theme of togetherness of the opening ceremony. There are a lot of other examples around the Olympics of people kind of showing videos of local Olympians, or in the case of, I think it was Procter & Gamble, I could be wrong, it was kind of mothers of Olympians, and it was a campaign specifically focused on the mothers of Olympians and kind of the bonds they shared with their athletes. So Twitter and TV, a lot of people ask, we know you're the second screen, but what do we do to kind of connect with it? I think one of the easiest ways is, if you do have any TV content, putting a hashtag in the commercial itself. It results in a 2 to 10 times increase in conversion volume on Twitter. Ad handles, so this is kind of your identity, whether it's at Audi or at a local or regional dealership. Putting it in the commercial, again, directs people where to go. It also gives you an important signal of kind of what the uplift from that commercial was. And then live tweeting, maybe not as realistic outside of kind of the big shows we saw at the beginning, where the content is drawn into where the Twitter content is drawn into the TV content. Here's an example from Audi from the Super Bowl 2 years ago that I think is really interesting, and I'll talk about why in a second. I think one of the really interesting things about this is their hashtag and the commercial really had almost nothing to do with the brand. Obviously, in this case, it did at the end, because one of the things they were pushing were the LED headlights, and I think that was a big selling point for them, a competitive advantage in their mind. But they chose to go with an unrelated hashtag, So Long Vampires, that tied more to the theme of the commercial than the underlying product. So we took a look at kind of what the volume looked like on Twitter, and you could see when the commercial ad aired, kind of both Audi and the So Long Vampires hashtag saw this tremendous spike. So it was a really creative use of an unusual hashtag and an unusual TV creative, and it ultimately ended up spiking brand mentions and brand conversations, as well as mentions of that specific commercial and that specific hashtag. And here's just an example of what they did after the fact on Twitter. They then promoted that same commercial to even increase the audience more. So I think driving traffic, this is sort of probably what's most relevant to some of the group here. We have some great data here. So ultimately, this is no surprise, but online reviews impact dealership visits. So kind of what people are saying about the dealer online. 50% say that reviews affirm their choice of dealership, et cetera. I won't go through all the data here, because I think we have some other great data to get through. Social content, as we saw in the stats at the beginning, it influences not just kind of brand affinity, but purchases. And in this case, US social network users who purchase goods or services as a result of social network content, 21% in the automotive space. And you can see that's actually the leading industry when you compare that to financial services, travel, et cetera. So really, really engaged and influential and influenced subset of consumers, I would say. This data is brand new. So we worked with Compete on a study to try to see kind of how Twitter activity and tweets actually influence other behavior. So taking a look at this slide, we took a control group of average internet users, and for folks who are not familiar with Compete, it's basically just a massive panel of people using the internet. So they have however many, and I could get the exact numbers, it's over 1 million different internet users, and they sort of look at their internet behavior over time, and then could cut and slice that data in different ways. So they were able to look at kind of a control group of average internet users and then users who were exposed to tweets from dealerships. And what they found was a 323% lift in dealer website visits from folks who were exposed to a tweet from that dealer. So not only does it build brand affinity, it actually does drive specific action online and offline. Similarly, this is percentage of users who searched on an auto brand term. So I talked a little bit before about how if you think about Google being that kind of last step in many ways in the search process and the decision-making process, what we found here is 143% lift in searching on a specific brand name from people who were exposed to auto tweets. And then this is taking a look at users who completed what we call an upper marketing funnel or lower marketing funnel action. Upper funnel includes stuff like inventory search, vehicle views, model info views, lower funnel actions on a website. So dealer locator, offers, build your own car, request a quote, financing, things like that. And what we saw was, in this case, even more than the others, a huge lift in folks who were exposed to tweets from auto manufacturers or dealers. So 504% lift versus the average internet user. So big takeaway here is I think it does drive behavior and it does build a connection with your potential consumers. So a couple pieces of advice, same-day repair in this case. This is sharing services, like what services are being offered, by using a very specific hashtag. So in this case, same-day repair is tweeting out, same day's experienced technicians provide expert hashtag luxury vehicle repairs throughout the Pacific Northwest. What they're doing in effect is getting in front of, becoming a part, they're building a conversation and then becoming a key leader in that conversation by defining the hashtag. And even if other folks are using that hashtag for other things pertaining to luxury vehicles, their conversation is going to come up in the dialogue for anyone there. So best practices here, obviously provide the information about your service offering, use a hashtag to participate in conversation, and use rich media. So this is videos, photos, and the things I talked about earlier that you can now pull into the tweet directly. Participate in regional conversations. I guess the main point of this one is make the content you're providing as regionally focused as possible. In this case, it is a big brand example, but it's Land Rover USA. They're focusing a campaign on New York City in particular. They're targeting, with their promoted campaign, they're targeting that region specifically in terms of who their promoted tweets are going to, and then they're customizing the content for that region. Customer support. Twitter across the board, not just in auto, is kind of used heavily for customer support. In this particular case, it's Lexus building brand loyalty by kind of generating positive word of mouth. And what they're showing here is a photo of their technicians at work. Someone replies at Luxury PR Gal, as always, so impressed with Lexus customer service at the dealer, getting my license plate put on, everyone's so friendly. Lexus then gets involved in the conversation. What dealer is this? Hopefully they then pulled the dealer into the conversation. And it was a great opportunity to kind of broadcast this message, not just to followers of Lexus, but to the followers of the dealer as well. Educate your audience. So this is Expert Tire. And what they're doing is connecting with advocates and driving awareness of their in-store services. So they're trying to drive traffic to the store. They're almost, in a lot of ways, kind of producing content that's just relevant and kind of good for the entire population. Drive safe out there, Texas. Be careful on the road in this rain. They're kind of taking advantage, as I think we could all relate to, of a big rainstorm and showing that they're providing advice in the scenario, but also linking their product to it in a lot of ways. And you can see the conversation here. Jen Webb, thank you for not only offering warranties, excellent follow-through and service. Someone else saying they have great service. And each time someone is doing this, they're responding personally to that person and saying thank you for this kind of vote of confidence. We really appreciate it, et cetera. This is pretty important if you could do it. The reason being, first of all, you're acknowledging a customer who's a brand advocate and kind of making them happy. The other reason is you're kind of drawing more attention to the part of the conversation and highlighting the fact that by thanking them that, that you are providing good service. You're also appearing authentic and human and showing that a real person is behind the company. Connect with consumer interests. So they're, in this particular case, Hibden Tires Plus, they're kind of trying to connect to a slightly broader interest category than just tires. They're trying to solve customer problems. So does your car suspension feel off? We'll give you straightforward advice. Learn more about our services. They're also promoting, and I think I have a couple other examples of this, they're promoting different sales they're having. Don't miss our Labor Day sale. Come in for a complete vehicle inspection with this coupon. Print here. So they're driving to a web link where you can print a coupon. That also provides, obviously, an important tracking metric. But in many cases, I've heard a lot of people say the paper coupon is almost irrelevant. It would be almost equally powerful if someone came in and said, you know, I'm mentioning hashtag this, or I saw you on Twitter. That's why I'm asking for this discount. Ultimately, like, what you want to know is that someone is coming from a particular source. It doesn't matter how you do it. Seasonal sales, I think this is obviously something commonplace throughout dealerships. The best practices here really provide exclusive offers. So again, you really do want to provide something that probably unique to Twitter in this case, in part so that you can track kind of what the uplift is from Twitter versus other channels. And Kia here is doing just that. Kia Smart Move sales event. This is probably linked to a national campaign, and they're sharing a national commercial. They're also inspiring. Another best practice is to inspire social sharing. So we have numerous examples of companies that do things like, one example is the clothing Bonobos or Bonobos, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but they ran a Twitter-specific sale, basically saying for everyone retweet this, and when we get to a certain number, that will kind of unlock a discount for Twitter users. So when we get to 60 retweets, we're going to give everyone 20% off their next pair of pants. That type of social sharing and kind of promoting it, it kind of, it gets the word out there even more, and B, it's kind of a fun thing to do. It makes it almost like a game or contest to as a group of brand advocates, get to a certain share of voice and then unlock a deal. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So that embedded information. So let's say I'm a dealer.
Yep.
I'm a dealer. I got a new commercial I cut. I want to get it out there locally within 10 miles of my dealership. I can put some interest. I said something about a Ford.
Yep.
The cost. So embedding the big, it's a commercial, so there's a video. Is there any additional cost?
No. No, there's no cost at all. So in that case, the example you were giving, what I would probably do is put the video on YouTube or something where it's easy to link to. Just by tweeting out, and put aside the promoted aspect of this for a second, just by kind of writing the Range Rover Evoque lights up New York City street and then putting a link to the YouTube video, the tweet would look exactly the same here. It would only go to your followers. If you wanted to reach a bigger base, what you would do is say in the interface or working with your account team at Twitter, say I want to promote that, and then it would go to, you could target people in a certain geography, you could target very, very broadly everyone interested in buying a new car or in autos generally, or you could target narrowly to kind of followers of Ford and Chevy and brands like them, and then
So basically, so that ad,
it looks the same.
so if I did, just for cost reasons, if I'm doing it with a video,
It would look like that.
there's no different cost.
No.
And the only cost I get is when someone clicks on it.
There's no cost at all if you're not promoting it, but it's just going to your followers. Yeah.
Let's say dealer's hasn't really figured out Twitter. He wants to start advertising on Twitter.
Only cost is if someone's viewing the video. Well, clicking on the tweet and then viewing the video. Yeah. Or retweeting or replying or anything like any form of engagement.
But if it's just showing up as an ad locally, and I'm somebody who on Twitter and I see it, I don't touch it, I don't pay nothing.
Nothing. Here's just one last example of providing offers. This is West Dakota Chevy. They kind of put this out there: buy any 2012 or 2013 Chevy, and if you're not happy, you can bring it right back. Another example: San Francisco Honda, save on four-wheel alignment in September. Anderson Honda, really big sales event going on right now, et cetera. The point is, these are kind of time-sensitive and geography-specific deals, and I think Twitter is a great place to do that, especially if you're promoting it and kind of targeting to a certain geography and a certain, for example, in the first case, if you're targeting to the followers of Chevy and people like the followers of Chevy, you're probably going to get to a pretty specific group of people once you overlay that with a geography restriction. And then lastly, I talked about this before in the case of TV, but integrating multimedia campaigns. So whether it's print or local billboards, again, including just something as simple as including a hashtag allows you to kind of take advantage of the conversation online, even if you weren't promoting it or running any ads online, but just tweeting content that's consistent with your message in print advertising or in TV advertising. It kind of unifies your marketing campaign, and it also gives you a sense of how well those other forms of advertising are doing in terms of driving the online conversation. Here's one last example. This is actually kind of a sale that was almost effectively done on Twitter. So Lorraine Catney tweets out, getting brakes replaced at Discovery Honda, thinking I should go test drive a Ridgeline, to which they see this in real time. Well, you do have a bit of time to kill since you're getting your brakes replaced. True, and the sun is shining. Turns out she does end up doing the test drive and ends up buying it, not taking it off the lot that day. And in fact, Discovery Honda said it's too bad you couldn't have driven away. But then she does get it a few days later. I'm loving it. Thanks again for being so wonderful, etc. Key takeaways here: drive engagement by creating a unique experience, make content compelling and shareable, and celebrate the wins. I think that last part's really important as well. So don't forget to say thank you, kind of congrats, things like that, and make it personable when you do have a victory on Twitter. Yeah?
Now, does Lorraine have to follow Discovery Honda there?
Not necessarily. So in this case, she was probably. But if I were to tweet out, for example, which I've done, to an airline or something saying, you know, at United, why is your flight delayed? I don't have to be following United to make that comment. But what it does affect is kind of who is seeing it. So if Lorraine is following, in this case, Discovery Honda, and Discovery Honda is following Lorraine, then the followers of both of them in the first case would have seen that tweet. If not, it probably would have been just Discovery Honda that would have seen it, and anyone who searched their timeline, but it wouldn't have been kind of broadcast out to all of their followers.
So if someone's sitting in my showroom and not a follower, and they tweet something like that, how quickly could I receive it?
It would be instant. Yeah. I mean, seconds.
How does that happen?
So as soon as they hit send, it's kind of going, assuming they have a mobile connection that's active and stuff like that, it's going into our platform, and it would show up in your timeline. I'm sorry? Yeah, so your identity is really what we call your @ handle. So in this case, Discovery Honda. If they didn't put that @ symbol and just mention Discovery Honda, you would not see it. That's all I had. That's all I had for today, but I'd love to answer any questions if we have more time. I know I'm probably running up on time, but.